welcome everybody. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn. I got an interesting topic here that I want to share with you, and it's really been something that's really been challenging me. I actually started working and taking certification classes with John Maxwell. John Maxwell is one of the industry leaders, been around for 50 years on leadership, for leadership coaching and things, and had a leadership role in my career, 40 some years, for a long time. And as our business grows, I want to be able to pass the good leadership things that I've done and what we want to embody as a company down to the rest of the organization. And so I thought, hey, I would take this leadership course and become a certified coach through John Maxwell's organization to try to learn the things that maybe I shouldn't have been doing over the course of my career, and those things that maybe I can do better, you know. And as I was doing that, as we see a constant stream of procedures, and literally we have worked on thousands of documents this year, and we have thousands more in the queue going into there and into 2025. The quality of procedures is something that is really troubling. You know, in some ways, we'd almost want to work ourselves out of business if the industry was really doing it well, because then none of you would need us. And still the same. Why? You know, why do we can see this consistent problems across multiple different industries that we work in? So I'm gonna share my screen, and hopefully that you enjoy this, and we'll see what we can do to try to bring some light to some things here as we move forward. So everybody can see my screen. Okay, Jillian, everybody's good. So I called this Lunch and Learn. How does leadership actually influence procedures, right? And so first, introduction to my team. Like I said, we're a small woman-owned business located out of Stuart, Florida. As you can see, the number of services that we have there on the slide, and we can make this available to you. And my core team here, when we say we're a woman-owned business, we are a seriously woman-owned business, and we have a good number of people, writers across the globe that work for us in all capacities. But anyway, this is kind of the introduction of our team here on this slide, as you can see it. And let's kind of get right into the discussion point. So in the commercial nuclear power industry, there's an organization out there called INPO, which is called the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations. INPO was created 40 plus some years ago as a result of the core damaging event that happened in 1979 at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant up in Pennsylvania. This organization was created to be a performance-based agency, as compared to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, that is a compliance-based agency, right? And so INPO publishes documents. They do 2-week inspections of every plant every 2 years. They have a massive database where they continue to trend all kinds of performance goals. There's about a book, about 500 pages of performance indicators that every nuclear power plant in this country sends to INPO to monitor their performance, and they're constantly looking for trends in order to try to make sure that the performance stays at the highest level possible for an industry that shares all their data. And so back in 2011, INPO published this document called the Guideline for Excellence in Procedure and Work Instruction Use and Adherence, right? And this document was published in many ways because we did see, despite the regulatory requirements we have for following procedures, there was a lot of inconsistencies across industry, especially as it fell into work instructions also. And so in this document, there's a couple of statements that I wanted to share with you that kind of set the tone for what we're going to talk about here during lunch. Notice, and these quotes, these are coming right from the document and from their, like I said, from the INPO 1103 document. It says, the purpose of procedure and instruction adherence is to help individuals maintain positive control of the work activity. That is, what is intended to happen is what happens, and that's all that happens. So if you kind of look at that in some ways, it's kind of talking about the adherence to procedures, but to enable people to do that, procedures have to be written at a quality level that can support that happening, right? Very hard to adhere to a procedure that is written very poorly, right? So obviously, the quality of the document has to be written such that this has the ability to be done. IMPO additionally said that before taking an action, a conscientious worker understands its significance and intended results. And when used thoughtfully and rigorously, the procedure gives the individual more time to think about the task, what is happening, what will happen, and what to do if things do not go as expected. Therefore, human performance tools should be considered as a means to an end. There again, think about what they're trying to say there to you, right? So they're kind of referring to procedures as human performance tools that enable workers to do these things. So when you think about the quality level necessary for the procedure has to be written at a level that can support accomplishing this so people can use it to use them and to adhere them. So I just wanted to kind of frame that for a moment, right? Now, as a result of that, let's see what the real results are, though. So these are just a few snapshots I took from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's website here in the United States. And these are just a few, and these are from a couple of different industries. This is from, and anybody that's really handling nuclear materials, right? But look at some of the findings that are just, I mean, this is just a small one page, one slide of a list that can go on and on and on, right? The licensee, which means the power plant, the people that actually hold the operating license for this commercial nuclear power plant, failed to establish and implement appropriate procedures and instructions for performing maintenance on an emergency diesel generator. A licensee, again, another power plant, failed to adequately inspect some high pressure core spray transformer wiring in accordance with some site procedures. Then there's some hospitals that failed to implement written procedures. And then there was another one there. It was another health system that said failed to ensure that written directives for permanent implant neuropathy therapy contained the information per the CFR. And then there was another failure to develop and implement and maintain written procedures. Then there's another licensee that basically failed to implement written procedures. And this is working with nuclear materials. Doesn't seem like this is, I mean, again, this is just one slide. I could basically spend the next hour and read through the list of all the ones that are there, and I'm not embellishing that. So then go on to the next one. Back in 2010, probably the world's, or at least in the United States, I would almost say probably the world, the worst environmental disaster of its time in 2010 related in 11 fatalities and 17 people injured at a well fire there in the Gulf of Mexico. That I think beginning of January of 2023, it was over $40 billion in damage and still rising after all these years with this, right? And this was from testing activities that they were performing at this well site because of some other problems that they were having in the process of drilling the hole for this thing. And then if you look at this, the Chemical Safety Board, which is a government agency that investigates accidents similar to this type and investigated this specific disaster. Here are some cut and paste from the inspection report that you can find yourself from going to the csb.gov website, right? And so here they noted that they had some technical issues, some equipment failures, and they talk about how these complex systems can almost always fail in complex ways. And then they recognized the fact, or they noted the fact that there was unrecognized technical issues, procedural weaknesses, and human errors, right? And then they talked about specifically that this pressure test that they were doing, this negative pressure test, and how the test itself was inadequate, both in the level of detail on the procedure and in the execution by the crew, right? They said the procedure didn't contain sufficient information on steps and expected pressures at key points, and even what the criteria was for a successful test, right? But then here's the kicker to me. A little bit later in the report, it goes on and it says that, of course, this was world news, and BP was very heavily the big energy provider. BP was very heavily involved with this, and they were they contracted the people that owned that drill rig, was a company called Transocean, and so anyway, from the testing that they were doing, that they made the comments that I just saw on the previous slide. But then look at this expert that BP hired, which had to be making a fortune there and being the expert for doing this. But look at the comment they made. They said that the rig crew does not have to be told how to run a negative test, that this should be a routine operation that fits within their training. That's really amazing to me, because any basic expert that looks at human performance would tell you is that one of the key principles in human performance is the fact that people make mistakes. So despite the training that you can give people, they're still human beings and they still have the ability to make mistakes. And so there's a big gap there in this statement made by this expert. But then the Chemical Safety Board came right back at them in the very next sentence and said, no, wait a minute here, right? This sentiment doesn't address the fact that procedures are more than a set of instructions. They're tools for those competent people that said, hey, they don't need to be told how to run their job, but they're tools for those people, motivated people, to plan, coordinate, and verify and ensure performance will achieve the intended results. And that's a key point right there at the very end of that sentence, that procedures are there to assure performance will achieve the intended results. But then when you go back and look at these other incidences, like on this discussion point, look at all the different places that aren't getting that message, are not understanding that. Look at the different violations. Why is that? Why is this happening, right? And so then you get in here and look at it a little bit further. And then I look at OSHA. So OSHA published for 2023, here's the top 10 serious violations that they've noted with people. And now let's look at the definition here of what serious means. Serious violation is one in which there's a substantial probability that death or serious physical harm could result. The employer knew or should have known of the hazard. And if you look at the top 10 hazards over on the right side of the screen, I kind of drew out, when I drilled down into the actual data that went into making this list. Look at all the things I underlined here that dealt with written workplace communication programs, energy control procedures, written respiratory program with worksite specific procedures, procedures that needed to be followed. So notice out of the top 10, there's 4 categories alone that had significant procedural issues noted that fed into these serious violations. Oh, but no, it gets better than that, right? Then you go to the next slide, and these are willful violations. Now, what is a willful violation? These are violations that were committed with intentional disregard of or plain indifference to the requirements of OSHA. So these are the top 10 lists of things that people knew were wrong, but they did it anyway. Then I went through and said, okay, from these, what did they happen to note? Is there anything here that they noted about procedures? And there was comments here on energy control and the tagout lockout stuff, where the established procedures were not where they needed to be. But this is the willful side. This means that they knew the procedures really weren't any good, but yet they still had this violation. And then down here at the very bottom, I thought this was interesting because this is where it gets into almost like the Deepwater Horizon, where that expert came back and said, "Oh, you don't need to tell my folks what they need to do. They're trained. They're not. They're knowledgeable here, right?" Well, then notice here on fall protection for training requirements, there was a one criteria here that says for under the retraining side, they said when the employer has reason to believe that any affected employee who has already been trained does not have the understanding and skill required, the employer shall retain each such employee. Well, this slide is saying that people knew that requirement, but willfully still violated that. They didn't give the people the retraining. Then you go in here and look at the next one, and you go to the Chemical Safety Board. If you look at the statistics here coming up for 2023, the number of reportable incidents from the Chemical Safety Board industrial accident investigations increased. The reportable incidents increased by 51% compared to the previous year, right? Incidents involving serious injuries went up by 11%, and those involving deaths increased by 78% from 2022 to 2023, right? The data included 162 incidences resulting in 25 fatalities, 92 serious injuries, 68 instances of substantial property damage since March of 2020, right? Then it keeps getting better, right? Now let's look at the pharmaceutical. It's an industry we haven't picked on yet, right? Here's a comment from the investigators of human performance challenges in the pharmaceutical industry, right? Human error is a significant challenge in the pharmaceutical, and the causes are multifaceted. Firstly, lack of training and education is a common cause for human error. Pharmaceutical manufacturing processes are complex and require specialized knowledge and skills. Without adequate training and educating, employees must not understand the importance of following standard operating procedures or may not be aware of the potential risks associated with their actions. In order to reduce human error in pharmaceuticals, it's critical to have strong quality control procedures in place, give staff members extensive training, and so on, right? Implementing well-designed standard operating procedures is fundamental in minimizing human error. These SOPs provide the step-by-step guidelines for laboratory operations, ensuring consistency, and so on, right? So what's the cost of that in the pharmaceutical? All right, so here's one operating experience note. Emergent Biosolutions is a contract manufacturer with a $628 million contract with the U.S. government for manufacturing vaccines. Ultimately, their Baltimore-based plant had a possible cross-contamination issue that led to 45 million doses of vaccine having to be destroyed at a loss of over $180 million in damages. Basically, the contract got canceled and their shares dropped 37%. Now, while human errors are costly, the good news is that these mistakes are often preventable, right? In these cases, many mistakes revolved around inadequate procedures or employees not following those procedures. Some of the employees weren't properly trained. Even if the procedures are adequate, employees can't always find and follow the most recent revision of the document. So you can see this is the pharmaceutical side. So what's the problem statement? That's the background for it. So in the 16 years that since we started this business in May 2008, we've helped customers eliminate thousands upon thousands of human performance errors in procedures and work instructions, thus raising the quality of their procedures and programmatic controls used to control these vital human performance tools. But despite these efforts, I see problems that were once thought fixed reoccurring, in some cases with even greater significance or impact. But why? Why? Are we focusing our attention in the wrong direction or not diving deep enough into the root of the issues? Is the industry overall, as industry, overall just complacent, or is there more to this story, right? How much does leadership play a role in the success or failures in the development and the execution of well-written procedures? As noted here, one of the most dangerous sentences in procedure writing is that we've always done it this way. Well, obviously, what we're doing is not working, because I only touched the tip of the iceberg in these slides, in the first 10 slides of this thing. I could literally talk for about 8 hours and on a whole week, and just going over operating experience things. And why is that? Why is that, right? Now, I think we got to look at the safety culture and maybe the organization's effectiveness, right? Understanding human error helps one recognize that human beings are complex. Now, this is from IMPO, by the way. This is from 2006 is when this was written. Now, think about it, it's over 18 years ago, and it's gotten worse, not better, right? So now IMPO basically made this quote, and they said, look, understanding human error helps one recognize that human beings are complex creatures, possessing a wide range of capabilities and corresponding limitations. Yes, there are limitations also. No matter how efficiently plant equipment functions, how good training is, supervision and procedures are, and how well the best worker, engineer, or manager performs their duties, people cannot perform better than the organization supporting them. Leadership, or the lack of. Now, each station's safety culture and organizational effectiveness have a direct influence on the quality of human performance, for good or for bad. And the value of excellence is embedded in the station's culture or your plant's culture. The organization will find ways to better itself. Pursuing excellence, therefore, promotes the highest levels of safety and reliability. And this isn't happening. This isn't happening. So the leadership challenge. The following slides will discuss how effective leadership, or the lack thereof, can significantly contribute to the ineffectiveness or the effectiveness of any organization's procedures and work instructions. So on the following slides, I have to give all the credit to John Maxwell, who is a New York Times best-selling author, speaker, leadership coach. There's his website in there. And this information came from a book he wrote years ago, right, on the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. What I decided to do was, looking at these events, I went back and I read this book many, many years ago when I actually started working at corporate, and I found myself struggling after leaving a power plant after everybody knew me, and then going to corporate, where all of a sudden I'm working with other plants in a bigger capacity than I was, and then finding myself struggling a little bit with dealing with people, you know. And so anyway, I was given this book as a gift from the vice president of commercial, or what you would say is the chief nuclear officer. They said, Steve, you know, I've looked at this book many years ago, and as the chief nuclear officer, this is something that has helped me, and I'm going to pass this on, and was a gift to me. And so I hope in some ways I'm kind of touching on this stuff as a gift to you guys also with this. And so what I did was, he wrote 21 laws that says that is effective in helping all of us be leaders. And whether you're a procedure writer, a supervisor of a procedure group, a manager, or whatever position that you have, in many ways, when you're writing procedures, you're there is developing one of the most influential tools we have to perform work without error. And so whether you recognize it or not, you are a leader in what you do. Or if you haven't recognized that, this is something that you need to think about, right? So here I picked 2 of the 21 laws to kind of think about, to emphasize, right? And so here's a list of all 21 of what he has topics in his book. And I picked the first 2, the one that's called the law of the lid and the law of influence, which I think are 2 major ones that are tied directly to those operating experience events that I shared with you as we kicked off this lunch and learn, right? Now, the law of the lid states in his book that the leadership ability is the lid that determines a person's level of effectiveness. no matter what job you have in what capacity, right? There's a certain lid to where we have professionally. You ever hear what some people would say is people kind of rise to their own level in effectiveness, right? The lower an individual's ability to lead, the lower the lid of your potential. The higher your leadership, the greater your effectiveness. So let's look at it this way. So if you happen to be a leader in some capacity, and let's say on a scale of 1 to 10 that you decided, like, what is your personal feeling about your ability to act in a leadership capacity, right? And let's say that you rated yourself as an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being perfect, right? That means is that your real effectiveness as a leader means that you can't raise the other part of the organization that you're leading. They can't go any higher than a 7 if you consider yourself an 8. Alternatively, let's say that you said, you know what, Steve, I'm not that good. I'm kind of new at this. I'm really kind of kicking off my career. If I look at where my leadership is today, I would say that I'm a 4, right? Well, that means that anybody or any work that you create in there, the best that you're going to get underneath that is a 3, right? Now, what does that really mean, right? So your leadership ability, for better or for worse, always determines your effectiveness and your organization's potential impact. So how does this relate to procedures? When you develop or act as a procedure reviewer, your name is placed in that paperwork, signifying your acceptance or ownership of the changes of that procedure in that change process. We need to recognize that procedures are tools designed to influence the users in the support of tasks for consistent and successful outcomes. We need to recognize that humans can make mistakes. However, this well-written influence tool immediately raises the user's potential from a 1 to 2 to 1 to 2 risk factor, which is considered knowledge base. 1 to 2 is a 50-50 chance. That means that for you and I to perform work without a procedure, the best we have is a 50-50 chance of getting things right. But immediately as I hand you a well-written procedure, your success or your risk raises, or should maybe it says lowers, right? Your risk improves to a 1 in 100 to 1 in 1,000 chance that you're going to have an error with a well-written procedure. Now, whether you realize it or not, your leadership lid directly impacts your effectiveness as a procedure writer. Your involvement impacts the users. Your involvement impacts the users using your tool that's designed to influence them, right? There's a wording there. If you are a procedure group, a planning supervisor, or department manager, this also applies to you, but even at a broader and more impactful level. The question is, what can we do to help raise your leadership lid? And so right now in the chat window, I'd like you just take a second. What are some things that you see that you think would give you the ability to make you more effective as a procedure writer or a supervisor, or like, how would you say is that if you realize that you have a lid, what things could you do to actually help raise the bar? That's another way of saying it, raising the bar, raising the lid. What things could you do to actually improve that? Anybody think about that? What are some things you can do? Read more. Yep. Education. Very good. Right. Influence those with a higher lid, right? I think more buy-in from higher management to realize the importance of procedures. Okay. Perform a procedure in an area that I'm unfamiliar with. Challenge the status quo. These are very good. Very good. Man, I'm proud of you guys. This is good. SME. Be the subject matter expert. Okay. All right. Anybody else got anything that see, getting trusted feedback from them leaders? All right. maintain clear expectations. So communication, right? Be a good communicator. Anybody else have anything they want to add? All right. So here's some things that I threw out there, right? So here's some things, right? So this kind of parallels to some of you, right? What can you do to raise the leadership lid? Number one, be, notice how I even bolded this, be the respected subject matter expert for the development of human factor procedures. Now, obtain your Procedure Professionals Association certification with stuff. Again, this isn't a sales pitch to sell certifications, but what am I trying to say with number one? What I'm number one is that sometimes the process that we have where we work is not optimal. It may be very outdated. What I'm trying to say to you is if you really want to be respected, be a subject matter expert in the development of human factor procedures. Now, what does that mean? That means be the subject matter expert. That means be knowledgeable, benchmark, understand what you find in the industry standard that's been around for 20 years, right? That get your certification, get training on this. Try to raise the level, raise your bar up. As you raise your knowledge and abilities up, you obviously will raise your lid. And then think about that. The more knowledge that you have to share with others, the more the rest of the organization comes up underneath of you. This is the reason why I even said to my own staff, I said, as my wife and I are business partners, it's where I'm 62 and I love doing that stuff, right? But there will be tomorrows where, maybe I'm not so greatly involved, but I need this business to keep moving, right? This isn't just all about Darlene and myself. This is about the organization and what we provide industry. So the rest of our team, all of Jillian, Sarah, everybody else on the team, we need to raise everybody up. But you know what? They can't raise any higher than if I'm the lid, right? So I need to basically raise my lid up so everybody else can come up with it as they go along. You need to understand and eliminate the gaps between your writing requirements and what the standard says, right? Now, yeah, everybody's a little bit different. You may look at some areas of the standard that you don't agree with, but I would tell you, it's been very, very effective for things. So I would say is at least do it in a risk-informed way. Know what the gaps are, and then try to eliminate those gaps where they make sense for you guys to do that. Thus, you're raising the lid, right? Do not just listen to your customer's feedback. Now, who's your customer? The people that you're writing the procedures for, right? Don't just listen to their feedback. Make sure you understand it. I can't tell you how many customers we have that after we get involved with them, it's just because we bring in a different perspective. But when we work with them, they said, well, we've received feedback from maintenance on this thing. They weren't getting it. Maintenance was telling them. And I think they truly wanted to listen, but they didn't understand it. Why is that? Because they had blinders on that this is the way we always do it here, right? It's just maintenance doesn't understand. No, they're your customer. They understand. You're not giving them what they need. And they're trying to tell you that if you understood it yourself, right? So you need to take action on that feedback. No black holes. No black holes. That tells people that you don't care, right? Do not get stuck in this is the way we've always done it mentality. Benchmark. Look beyond yourself. Be the industry leader, not the follower. Understand the new balance. Notice I said, understand the new balance between I kind of combined it. Normally I would have just said training, but what I'm trying to get across is that there's training, skills of the craft, competency, and then on the other side, there's procedures. What do I see today is the image that you see on the left side of the screen. Training is so heavy, and procedures are like a necessary evil or noise, right? We need to understand the person, me, you, right, needs more than just training. As you saw from the Chemical Safety Board on the one slide when we first kicked off this lunch and learn, it talked about to assure performance obtains those results, you have to have the procedure because otherwise you're negating the human performance challenge where people make mistakes, like that expert hired by BP. We want to make sure that training and procedure thing is balanced in there, right? And so that means if you're a procedure writer, you need to understand what they train on. I could ask you, how many of you have ever communicate with the training department? How many of you? On a daily, when you're developing a procedure, how often do you communicate with them to understand what they're training on as compared to what you're writing in the procedure? Look like Amy had their hand up. What that? Well, there you go, Kim. That's very good. Almost weekly. Dale Garner, right? Not very often. It's usually the other way around, okay? Press there, Dale. It's really good, right? Amy, Gabrielle says no, never. What's training? You understand my point? But yet, well, they go William, and you said frequently. That's awesome, right? That's awesome. Well, should be the David Short should be the first stop, or the change management. You guys are good. You guys are good. So you guys are seeing the point, right? I mean, there's got to be a balance there between the two. What happens is if you have more than one or the other, you're going to have problems, right? Training is forgotten. Procedures are forever. Yeah, training. You're right. Training is oftentimes boring. You lose interest quickly. It needs to be dynamic. Well, Katrina, I hope I'm being dynamic enough for you, But anyway, but you guys can see what we're talking about there, right? So lastly, on the raising the lid, right? So IMPO 1103, which is a procedure and work instruction use and adherence standard, right? Notes the following up in the roles and responsibility areas of this document. Now, again, this is commercial nuclear, but I think it applies pretty much everywhere. It says station management has the overall responsibility to provide procedures and work instructions of sufficient quality to accomplish intended tasks. I see quite a few bad procedures and even in the commercial nukes, right? Why is that? Doesn't seem like we're meeting that. Now it says responsibility also includes, now it says station management has the overall responsibility. Responsibility also includes the development, the implementation, and verified, look at this, verified effectiveness of use and adherence policies and requirements, right? Station management is responsible to ensure the following. People are trained on procedure and work instruction use and adherence. People are trained and qualified to perform the assigned procedures and instructions. Personnel meet the procedure, work instruction use and adherence requirements. Recognize that this responsibility cannot be accomplished if you ask the staff to use and adhere to procedures that look like they're written on a cocktail napkin with a crayon. It's not going to happen, right? There's no way to adhere to a poorly written procedure effectively, right? All right. So here's the second law that I want to talk about, the law influence. And so we kind of started off this year with a new kind of little sticker here for ourselves. And we said, hey, procedures need to be influential, right? You'll see in some IMPO documents and some other ones that in the Department of Energy, where they talk about how procedures are the number one human performance tool to positively influence for performance. But then how does it happen when they're written poorly, right? Because that means it's a double-edged sword. So now you come over and look at this and says, all right, and these are experts that came from John Maxwell's book, right? It says the true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's a quote right from John Maxwell himself, right? So the true measure of leadership is influence. So think about that. If your procedures that you write are the number one influential tool, that means that you have your finger on the pulse, on the heartbeat of the organization through the procedures that you write. So indirectly, your leadership is embedded in the quality of your work. And there is a lot of absolutely horrible quality out there, right? So I think it's very reflective of us personally, on me personally, my company, our company, that we need to be influencers here with this. And that's the reason why I kind of made this kind of about the lunch and learn. Now, John Maxwell also wrote, he says, look, true leadership cannot be awarded, appointed, or assigned. It comes only from influence, and that can't be mandated. It's got to be earned. So for you to be influential, your influence is a direct correlation to the quality of your work and what you produce, that is handed off to the person in the field that's relying on the quality of the work that you did on their success. They can follow it blindly, and that could be the last thing they follow ever. Right. So you got to remember that the work, your output of the work that you create has a direct impact on whether someone goes home at the end of the day. Right? Now, the very essence, came from Harry Overstreet, who was a leading psychologist and author. He wrote, the very essence of all power to influence lies in getting the other person to participate. My problem that I'm seeing is a lack of participation. Why is it? Because the procedures are so poor. People think they know more than what the procedure has to offer them. And so then it results in those incidents that I discussed earlier here with this stuff, right? So the questions are your procedures written at a high quality level that people want to participate? If not, why? Now, if you answer no, how can we change this? And so let me ask you this. How can you change this? If you agree with this thought process here, is that you're an influencer, not in the negative internet way we see it today, but wokeness and all this other stuff. We're talking about things from the aspect of that we're trying to influence people successfully for the outcome of their work, right? And so from that aspect, what do you see? What do you think? How can you provide a greater influence on people through the quality of your work? So I'll put it there in the chat. What do you think? And that's exactly right. We ought to talk offline with this on that too. Make instructions as concise as possible. That's really good, right? I mean, yeah, you're trying to make it clear, make it concise. Amy, if you want to do something after this thing, just give me a call, or we'll set someone. Make them credible to the user. All right, so Colleen, how do you make them credible? I mean, I know this seems like I think it would be kind of a simple question to you, right? How do you make them more credible? How do we do that? Yeah, I'm on with you. Make them workable in the field. Personalize, all right? Anybody else have any ideas? All right. Here's a couple I'll throw at you. So first off, how do you let the results speak for themselves? Here's a simple admin procedure I pulled off of our rack of doom and gloom, right? So you can see what the before paragraph had in it. And then below is the after. What would you rather read? The top one or the bottom one? Well, I mean, that's a really good comment you said. You said you must believe the cost to invest in quality procedures does not outweigh the cost of a mistake. You're absolutely right. And so then what's the cost if you don't go home today? Or you go home, but you're not going home the way you think you're going home. You know what I mean? Yeah, notice the spacing this improves the readability, the emphasis techniques that were involved, I mean, making sure you have the right level of detail. This is just one example I just pulled quickly, the ad for the lunch and learn. I mean, I literally have thousands of these things we could look at before and afters on it. I mean, we just finished a fairly big project, about 430 documents. It took a couple months to do. And I mean, there's more examples than you can shake a stick at, right? We want to make sure and people really understand and comprehend what's going on. So let's look at this next slide here, right? So is embody, we want to embody, I use the word embody. So let's see if I use the right word there. Embody the mission to help others see and believe in this quote from the Chemical Safety Board. So the Chemical Safety Board said procedures are more than a set of instructions. They are tools for competent, motivated individuals to plan, coordinate, and to assure performance will achieve the intended results. I think we've got to get people to believe that, right? But to believe that, you got to make sure that you have some standard that you're addressing and that you can provide it that's similar to this example. And there's better ones out there. There's all kinds of different examples, right? But we want to make sure that people believe in this, right? Be a change agent, not a roadblock. Be the solution, not part of the problem. I think sometimes we do that. We get very comfortable in our work, and you come in like, I want to do what I got to do and get out, and so you kind of put roadblocks up. But yet here overall, we're having these problems. So we got to make sure we set the expectations properly, and that we ensure that we recognize even ourselves, stand back, and it says, you know what, I'm really being resistant to this change here, but why? I mean, I think Sarah has a great idea. So why should I, just because I didn't do it that way in my history, I don't know. I may not think the way she wants to do it is as effective as what my idea would be, but hey, who's to say that I'm right? Right. So, let her have the ability, or Julian, let you have the ability to get out there and try this stuff, right? Participate or consider taking on a leadership role in other industry groups, such as the PPA. There's EPRI Work Planners Group. There's for the people that are on the utilities and belong to EPRI. NERMA, the Nuclear Information Records Management Association. HOP, which is the Human Organizational Performance Consortium. And there you can see their website with Todd Conklin and Rob Fisher and a number of Tony Mashura, a number of others that are there. They have conferences, they have groups, organization groups. And so, be an influencer is that you have to look out beyond yourself. Imagine being the person that does the benchmarking, and then you bring back all these great ideas. Well, the idea then is to try to influence the way we're doing it and say, hey, I like those ideas. Let's try that. Let's do those things, right? You can really change your results considerably when you're not afraid. Don't let fear hold you back. Old proverb here is that he who thinks he leads but has no followers is only taking a walk. As a procedure writer, supervisor, department manager, you can ensure the quality of your procedures are influencing others, or they won't follow you. If they don't follow you, you are not a leader. So one of the ways for leadership is the fact that, hey, we do have our summer course is sold out now, and for July, but we have a fall one coming up in October. That's a good start for many of you for that haven't done it, or haven't done it in the past. It's something to consider. Again, I'm not trying to be a salesperson here as much as I'm just trying to say, hey, here's an opportunity you can do. Take that. Find out where the gaps are between the way what you have experienced, what's in your head, or in the organization that you have. Do a gap analysis, and then, right for wrong, change it. Change it. And then I think good things, but as you can see, something's got to change, because I think it's got to, when you look at those events in there, the history is all right. Well, let's look at the process. Let's look at the writer's manual if they have one. Let's look at the tools they're using, the templates. Let's look at the training that they have. And there's many places where we come up with nothing. There is no training. There is no guidance in there. It's really just dependent on someone says, hey, you need to write a procedure on this. And they take something off the shelf and they make it look like that. We have many customers like that. Is that really where you want to be? Is that really the successful place to be? Not really. You know what I mean? But yet, if you take a step back even further, I would say for many years, I looked at the process and said, oh, well, we have a gap here in the process. But you know what? Someone owns that process, or someone should own that process. And maybe the problem isn't the process, but it's the person who owns it and their leadership. And so we're going to be looking more heavily at the decision makers, the people that should be in the know, that maybe what they're more focused on is a daily production, but not worry, and then they worry about the corrective actions. I think sometimes the corrective action process is sometimes the biggest problem. It's right. We come up with this stuff, we have something broken, go fix a procedure, but then we don't realize what goes into making that procedure right, because we don't have the rules there. And so what we do is some of the things we change procedures are ineffective, or actually cause more problems. Right. So anyway, questions from anybody? Well, anyway, my contact information is right here on this slide. You want to jot that down. If you have any questions, you can send me a text message. You can give me a phone call. Anything like that. We're always available to any of you to try to help as we go along. And so, again, like I said, we have the class in October. Now, if you're interested, if you know people or know people that could be involved in that, we would really love follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook. You'll see we have a lot of messages out there. We have these lunch and learns that we do. There's a new revision come out, the industry standard, probably next month or two. So we'll be talking about that and setting some discussions on the changes that are coming out with that. But anyway, thank you guys for taking time during lunch to spend some time with us. And I hope this was something to think about moving forward. I really wish all of you a lot of luck with what you do. And again, please don't be afraid to use this as a resource if you have questions. Thank you.